Peace negotiations with Putin, who could ever think, right? Demanding new concessions for a ceasefire. All eyes on Trump's next move now. Next topic. Finland sentences Russian neo-Nazi mercenary Jan Petrovsky to life for war crimes in Ukraine. And a Blitz interview with General Wesley Clark, a person who surely knows everything about war and big politics. Good afternoon, my name is Henry Keane and we are UATV English, an English-speaking Ukrainian state media, in constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. As the United States delegation in Moscow worked to hammer out a ceasefire agreement with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, the Russian dictator responded by demanding extensive concessions in exchange for a ceasefire deal in Ukraine. Well, so far, Trump has made harsh demands on Ukraine while avoiding putting similar pressure on Russia. Now, attention turns back to Trump as to whether he will continue his trend of appeasement towards Russian dictator or double down and force Russia to accept a deal. Speaking at a press conference on March 13, Putin demanded guarantees that Kiev will not mobilize or train troops nor receive military aid during the proposed 30-day ceasefire, which obviously is exactly what experts see it to be, an attempt to prolong negotiations rather than a sincere attempt at peace. Putin's commands came 2 days after Kiev agreed to a ceasefire proposed by Washington during talks in Saudi Arabia on the condition that Russia also accept the terms. Putin also said that further talks are needed to prepare for a ceasefire, including a conversation directly with Comrade Trump. The delegation in Moscow was headed by Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, as, I quote Russians, "Too pro-Ukrainian Keith Kellogg is not our kind of person," end of quote, left in the early hours of March 14th. Donald Trump responded that Putin's statement was, I quote, "very promising but wasn't complete," end of quote, adding that he's willing to meet with the Russian dictator. Recently, ahead of the Russian dictator's demands, Trump was very clear: accept this or I'm going to get tough on you, said John Herbst, the US ambassador to Ukraine under George Bush. Obviously, Trump's going to look like a world-class fool if he's letting Putin getting away with saying no to this proposal. There will be serious pressure on him to do something against Russia, added John Herbst. One potential Trump's response could be increasing sanctions against Russia, a move that Senator Lindsey Graham has pushed for in the event that Putin rejects the ceasefire proposal. If Russia refuses a ceasefire, we should sanction the hell out of them, Graham wrote on X on March 11th after Washington and Kiev inked their deal. Well, Trump's going to look like a world-class fool if he lets Putin get away with saying no to this proposal, as I said. But whether or not Trump is willing to change, actually, his appease a monster stance is still up in the air. Another question is whether or not Trump will view Russia's new ceasefire demands as a rejection. Because one of the few constants in the foreign policy of Trump 2.0 is the affinity for Russia, experts say.
Trump is notoriously vain and thin-skinned and easily offended. If he decides that Putin is making him look like a fool in the eyes of the world and not showing him respect, then he could lash out. But even if that happens, Trump seems to be in the mindset of viewing any demands from Russia as reasonable rather than insane, and no list of concessions demanded from Ukraine by Russia as outrageous. Jenny Mathers, a lecturer in international politics.
Putin needs that war, as simple as that. And he will try to prolong the negotiations, which gives him an opportunity to further deteriorate or disrupt even relations between Washington and Kiev and Washington and its European allies within the process.
Putin needs this war for its own sake, more than he needs victory in it, more than he needs Ukraine, and more than he needs anything else. For him, war is a way of life, a method of governing the country, a way of maintaining himself in power. Sergei Parhomenko, Russian-born columnist and political commentator.
Well, here is some hard truth in easy terms, put for you by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Putin is afraid to say directly to President Trump that he wants to continue this war, that he wants to kill more Ukrainians. That's why Moscow demands such preconditions for a ceasefire that will make it impossible or will postpone it as long as possible. Everyone knows it. The question is, will Donald Trump act as American president or Russian one? The Helsinki District Court sentenced Russian neo-Nazi mercenary Jan Petrovsky to life in prison for war crimes committed in Ukraine, Finnish public broadcaster Yle reported on that on March 14th. Petrovsky, so-called of the Rusic paramilitary unit, was convicted of war crimes in Luhansk Oblast on September 5, 2014, during Russia's invasion of Donbass. Prosecutors presented video evidences showing him ordering and participating personally in the execution of Ukrainian soldiers and prisoners of war. Petrovsky, of course, denied all accusations, but the court ruled that the video recordings and other evidence provided sufficient proof of his involvement. Rusic, a notorious Russian neo-Nazi group, has documented and published evidence of its own war crimes, including tortures and killings. The Russian unit Rusic, linked closely to Russia's Wagner group, has a long history of brutality. Co-founder Alexei Milchakov gained notoriety for publishing images of animal cruelty in Ukraine and requested Petrovsky's extradition, but a Finnish court ruled on December 8, 2023 that it could not be sent to Ukraine, citing concerns over prison conditions under the European Conventions on Human Rights. Well, maybe there are some easy terms for our truth about why worry about prison conditions for someone who, not just in cold blood, but loved to torture and murder prisoners and now gets to choose conditions for his own imprisonment as he would be like choosing a room with a view in a hotel. But I have no easy terms for you this time. Maybe Finland indeed is right looking for ensuring human rights, even for inhumane beings, but after all I have personally seen in Bucha with my own eyes, the only right Russian fascist Jan Petrovsky deserves all right to me is the right to become a fertilizer for Ukrainian soil, ensuring at least some good in his miserable existence. Hello, UATV English is online. Let me put it to you like this. Our guest has the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, 3 awards. Distinguished Service Medal, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, 4 awards. Bronze Star Medal, 2 awards. Purple Heart, Meritorious Service Medal, 2 awards. And the Army Commendation Medal, 2 awards. United States Army General, a person who surely knows what it would take to start and stop the war. I give you General Wesley Clark. It is an honor and privilege to have you with us, sir. Hello.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be with you.
Right, well, the first question is, just out of pure interest, according to your extensive military experience, is it easier to start a war or to end it?
Well, it's obviously difficult to end a war. Everybody's observed this, and it's one of the first things written by people like the great war philosophers like Clausewitz. No, it's very easy, and we've seen many examples of this in the 20th century, and I hope we're not going to see that example again in the case of Russia's aggression against Ukraine.
Well, to you, General, what is a just end of the war in Ukraine? What is a just and long-lasting peace? Everyone says that, like from every corner I hear that. But to you, sir, what will it be like?
It would be the withdrawal of Russian forces from Donbass and Crimea. You'll give them a naval base at Sevastopol. They'll return all the children who've been abducted, account for all the people that have been injured or missing. They'll pay reparations, and they'll also turn over to the International Criminal Court those people who have been charged with international war crimes.
Which is unlikely to happen, isn't it?
It's not likely to happen, and it's a very sad thing because for 80 years we've tried to build an international environment in which the rule of law, territorial integrity, human rights are respected. The lesson we learned out of World War One, which is your first
Right.
question indicates it's difficult to stop.
Right.
In World War One, there are a lot of lessons, but one of them is that we didn't finish the war the right way. Germany began to sue for an armistice in late August of 1918. And the Allied military leaders, with the exception of General Pershing, the U.S. leader, were all in favor of it. War had gone on for 4 years, armies decimated. Let's get it over with. Pershing warned that if you don't finish this war against Germany, it'll restart again. And sure enough, it did. So we have to be careful about how this war ends. We want a sustained peace, not a ceasefire that allows Russia to feel aggrieved, rearm, and reattack in 2 months, 2 years, or 5 years.
Well, yeah, if the world gives us weapons in Ukraine, because I'm in Ukraine, I mean, I've been in Bucha. I'm here in Ukraine for 3 years in a row, so I've seen it all. So I know that if the world gives us weapons, we will hand Russians their heads for sure. But the world is, for various reasons, is just, let's put it mild, somewhat afraid. Is the United States, for whatever reasons, afraid of Russia generally, you think?
Well, I think there are two different strands of thought. On the one hand, the previous administration simply was, they were really caught off guard. I mean, the people that were in it were inexperienced. They didn't understand the logic of the Cold War. I mean, they were all very smart people academically, and they'd all been staffers somewhere, but they didn't have the stature themselves, and they didn't have the personal hands-on experience of living through the Cold War, dealing with these kinds of threats,
Right.
being able to face up to Russia. They were just shocked by the nuclear threats that were intimidated by Mr. Putin against them. So that was part of it. But there was another strand of thought too. There's always been this feeling among the policy community in the United States that somehow Russia is, it's a center. They accepted it as, they accept Russia as the center of what the Russians call Ruski Mir. And
Right.
so, I mean, Ukraine was like, what is this about? I mean, well, who is Ukraine again? And aren't they like less educated or something? There was always this feeling that the center was in Moscow. And, this is what led to the agreement where Ukraine was required to give up its nuclear weapons back in 1994. And then there's, this other strand, I guess is the third strand, which said we pledged to support the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Well, we didn't. Actually, President Obama in 2014 told the Ukrainians not to defend Crimea. He said, give it up, don't provoke Mr. Putin. So that was the start of the failure to live up to our obligations that we had undertaken as a nation. Just a lot of misunderstanding about Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe has been a sort of cockpit of conflict now for over 100 years. It's a result of ethnic tensions, empires, ethnic cleansing, murders, all kinds of issues, everything from Turkey and Armenia on north. It's very difficult for Americans who don't come from the region, don't speak the language, don't see the news. They don't understand it. And that burst on the scene to the American people in the early 1990s with the conflict in Yugoslavia. And so there were many who didn't understand that. It was Germany that finally forced the resolution in Yugoslavia. Said, we've got 2 million refugees in Germany, and we can't, it's costing us billions of marks, Deutsche marks. We can't afford it. Do something. So finally, we got something done, and NATO acted. NATO decided in the 1990s that it had to be out of area to provide security for Europe. Somehow, when everything went wrong in Ukraine, NATO decided it didn't have to be out of area and wouldn't be out of area. I called the NATO, tried to get the NATO Sec Gen. I got the Deputy Sec Gen, and when this first started, and it was all about what the United States told NATO to do, and it was the fear of confrontation with Russia.
Well, here we are, right? Well, I mean, do you believe that there is a ground for cautious optimism after meeting in Jeddah?
No, I've got my hopes suspended here.
Right.
Look,
I mean, that was straightforward. Yeah. Okay.
I just think that after having dealt with Mr. Putin and watched him and so forth for over 20 years, he's a brilliant statesman. He knows what he wants. He wants the restoration of the Soviet space. So checking him and holding the line at portions of 4 oblasts in Ukraine, he's not likely to then say, I was wrong for 20 years, and
Right.
I think I'll just stop right here.
Yeah.
It was too expensive. No, it's not just Mr. Putin. He's not a democratically elected leader. He's not
No, it's
responsible,
not.
but he does manipulate and in some ways reflect a certain Russian imperialist culture. It's like the sign that we saw displayed about Alaska, Nashi about Alaska. That was in Russian. Like,
I mean,
they
it's
sold it to America, and they want it back. I mean, it's what we would call a puerile 19th century game. I heard it from Yevgeny Primakov in 1998 when he quoted British Lord Palmerston from 1837 saying, and that was when Britain said, we have no permanent friends, only permanent interests. And so Primakov quoted Count Gorshkov from the 1890s, the Tsarist foreign minister, saying, we have no permanent friends, only permanent interests. And there he is in 1998 saying this. And, nothing could be more incorrect than the way we've tried to reshape the world over the last 80 years, which is to have permanent friends, and through trade agreements and collective security have interests coincide, so that you bring the world together. You don't have sharp delineations, say nashi, vashi, and separate the world into spheres of influence.
Well, I mean, yeah. Don't get me wrong, sir, but you need a lot of things to do that. You need education. You need more or less state social level in all these countries. But when the people, I mean, whatever or whoever thinks about Trump's administration, I mean, he is a morbid populist. But how he could be there? He just took the ground the Democrats yielded. Is he not?
Well, American politics is a hours-long discussion all in itself.
Right. Well, that much is true. Absolutely.
Let's not go into that right
now. Right. Okay. Let's go.
The things we can that are important to the people of Ukraine, and that is
that was a good point. Sorry.
And lasting peace, and a long-term relationship with the West, and the opportunity. I drove across. I've driven many times from Poland into Ukraine in the last 2 or 3 years. And it's always striking when you go across the border, because you can see the benefit of being in the EU versus having been cut off from the EU by Russian interference for the last 30 some odd years since the Cold War. And of course, Ukrainian people want to be associated with the West, because when you're with the West, you've got a chance to be in a larger economic community. You got assistance, you're connected to travel and so forth. And when you're inside what was going to be the Eurasian Union, you were subject basically to covert and overt Russian control.
Absolutely, right. Nothing else, actually.
I was in Kazakhstan in 2013, and I heard the Russian energy minister explain how this works. said, you know, the Eurasian Union, it's a really going to be a great thing. We'll control the borders, the customs, the airspace.
Right.
You don't have to do anything. We will take care of all that. And of course,
Okay.
the currency.
Right.
And by the way, also the electricity grid. So if anything, so it was perfect for Mr. Putin because he didn't have to worry about being elected in
Yeah,
Kazakhstan or
I
Ukraine.
mean, yeah, absolutely. You just said, well, maybe just another anointment as a
Right,
Tsar, and that's it.
right.
I
But
mean,
if but if
what's
there were
written?
but if there was going to be a problem, you could shut off the electricity.
Right, yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Well,
it
well,
was
that's
so transparent. It was so transparent. And there is. I was with Foreign Minister Ivanov in a meeting in Brussels in the late 1990s when we were discussing the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty, which were still waiting to be
mm,
resolved. And here he was telling me, General Clark, under this, you could have a NATO division in Slovakia next to Russia.
what?
And I'm like,
And he was like,
Minister, I
he
said,
was really, sir, he was expecting you to say, "Oh my God, this is a brilliant
he
idea."
spoke, he was speaking pretty good English by this time. And I said,
Mm.
Minister, you've been to the Russian military. You think one NATO division is a threat to Mother Russia? Hey, this is a joke. He
It
laughed.
is.
Of course it was a joke, but it's the way that Russia has tried to portray NATO as a threat for other reasons. There's a
Mm,
reason for doing this. It's not about NATO. It's about keeping democracy away from the Russian system. And it's about being able to have a buffer state.
right.
Since from the time Lenin established the Comintern in the 1920s, and he said communism, Marxism, Lenin can't survive in a single country. And he turned the tables on Germany, which
Mm,
had put him in power to destroy
exactly.
the Tsar. And there he is going against Germany in the 1920s. And of course, there were communist agents in the United States that we finally made the Communist Party illegal in the 1950s. But social media has opened everything up again. It's given incredible, what we would call attack surfaces. And it's confusing to people. It's made a representative democracies suddenly direct democracies, and the people aren't prepared for this. This is what caused Brexit. We know there was Russian influence in that. And
Mm,
the Senate Intelligence Committee in the United States has clearly documented Russian efforts in the United States to have President Trump elected in 2016. We know
right.
that. So these are proven facts. But the point is that um, Russia isn't secure in its borders. It isn't because it always wants more land, more vassal states, more protection, more insecurity. And it's, as Henry Kissinger said once, you can't allow one nation's insecurities to cause the rest of the world to be insecure. I mean, nobody wants to bother Russia. If people like President Putin and they like the Russian system, that's fine. You're on your own.
Exactly within your borders.
NATO is not going to bother you. It's like former Congressman Rahm Emanuel said. It wasn't NATO pushing east. It was European nations coming west,
Mm.
demanding assistance from NATO because of fear of Russia,
Well,
which
I,
is
I, I
justified.
couldn't agree more. So, absolutely. Right. Well, thank you. Thank you so very much. I would love a conversation hours long about foreign policy, American policy, because I believe your experience is just enormous. I would just love to hear your thoughts on different matters. Just promise me we can do it sometime again in the future when you find time for us.
We'll do that. Wish my
Thank you so
all
very
the best wishes to the people and soldiers of Ukraine. You're fighting for us. We know it. Thank you.
Well, that was it for tonight. My name is Henry Keen, and we are UATV English, an English-speaking Ukrainian state media in constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Please like, share, and comment. Your voice matters always, as it in turn helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. So stay safe and see you very soon. Goodbye.